The contract termination notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, stamped in bold red letters across official letterhead. It announced the immediate cessation of all business relationships between Castellano Industries and my consulting firm, effective within 30 days. I stared at the document, my fingers tracing the cold corporate language that essentially meant one thing. My own family was cutting me off from the empire I'd helped build from behind the scenes. My name is Sofia Chen-Castellano, though in the business world, most know me simply as S. Chen, founder and CEO of Strategic Solutions Network. 5 years ago, I was the family disappointment, the daughter who dared to question the old ways and challenge my father's iron-fisted leadership of our multi-million-dollar construction conglomerate. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat in my corner office overlooking downtown Chicago's skyline. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see 3 different construction sites, all bearing the Castellano Industries logo, all unknowingly dependent on contracts and partnerships that flowed directly through my network. But my family had no idea that the daughter they'd banished for being too progressive and disruptive to tradition now held the invisible strings that kept their business empire functioning. My phone buzzed insistently. The caller ID showed my brother Marco's name, and I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But curiosity got the better of me, and I answered on the 4th ring. Sophia. His voice carried that familiar tone of condescending authority he'd perfected since taking over as vice president. I assume you received our notice. I did. I kept my voice neutral, professional, giving nothing away. Look, this isn't personal. It's just business. Dad feels it's time for Castellano Industries to work with more established firms, companies that understand our values and tradition. I almost laughed. Established firms. If only he knew that half of those established firms were either subsidiaries of my network or completely dependent on my supply chain connections. And what values are those, Marco? Loyalty, family, respect for hierarchy. Each word was delivered like a lecture. You never understood that. Always pushing back, always trying to change things that have worked for decades. I watched a crane lift steel beams at the construction site across the street, knowing that those beams came from suppliers I'd negotiated contracts with personally. Maybe I understood more than you think. Dad's made his decision. He wants a clean break. No more mixing family with business when it comes to you. Marco's voice carried a hint of satisfaction, as if he'd been waiting years for this moment. Honestly, Sophia, it's probably for the best. You were never really cut out for this industry anyway. Never cut out for it. The words stung, even though I'd heard variations of them countless times throughout my childhood and early career. Too soft, too idealistic, too willing to challenge the status quo. What they never understood was that questioning their methods wasn't about rebellion. It was about evolution. I see. And who's taking over the coordination for the Midwest expansion project? Morrison and Associates. Dad's golf buddy recommended them. They're more our speed, traditional, reliable, no unnecessary complications. Morrison and Associates. I knew them well. In fact, I'd been their primary subcontractor for logistics and supply chain management for the past 18 months. They were about to discover just how reliable they could be without my network supporting them. Well, I wish you luck with that transition, I said, meaning every word in ways Marco couldn't possibly comprehend. Thanks. And Sophia? Maybe this is your chance to find something more suitable. Dad mentioned there might be opportunities in event planning or interior design. Something more appropriate. The dismissal in his voice was nothing new, but it still ignited something fierce in my chest. Event planning. As if my MBA from Northwestern and my track record of increasing operational efficiency by 40% across multiple industries was equivalent to arranging flower centerpieces. After hanging up, I leaned back in my leather chair and allowed myself a moment to process. The familiar sting of family rejection mixed with something else: anticipation. They thought they were cutting me loose, but they had no idea they were actually cutting their own lifeline. My assistant, Jennifer, knocked and entered with her usual efficiency. "Ms. Chen, I've been monitoring the Castellano Industries communications. As you requested, they've just sent out RFP requests to 6 different firms for comprehensive logistics support. Let me guess, they're all firms we either own, partner with, or supply." Jennifer's smile was subtle but telling. All 6. Plus, Morrison and Associates just called requesting an emergency meeting about scaling their operations. Apparently, they just landed their biggest contract ever. I stood and walked to the window, looking down at the bustling city below. 5. Years ago, when my father had essentially forced me out of the family business for the crime of suggesting we modernize our approach to sustainability and worker relations, I'd made a choice. Instead of fighting them directly or trying to prove my worth within their existing framework, I'd decided to build something bigger, something they'd need, even if they never knew it. Starting Strategic Solutions Network hadn't been easy. I'd used my business school connections, my understanding of the construction industry's pain points, and my natural ability to see patterns and opportunities that others missed. Within 2 years, I'd built a network of specialized firms that could handle everything from supply chain logistics to regulatory compliance to environmental impact assessments. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The beauty of my approach was its invisibility. Large companies like Castellano Industries rarely dealt directly with every vendor and supplier. They worked with established firms who then subcontracted the actual work. What they didn't realize was that I'd systematically positioned myself as the critical link in that chain. When Morrison and Associates needed specialized equipment, they came to me. When Reynolds Construction required environmental compliance consulting, they used my subsidiary. When major projects needed coordination between multiple vendors, they relied on my network's seamless integration. I'd built an empire in the shadows, one that supported the very industry that had rejected me. Jennifer cleared her throat softly. "There's something else. The Henderson Plaza project? You know, the one Castellano Industries is leading? Their primary concrete supplier just had a major equipment failure, 3 weeks behind schedule. And? Meridian Materials has the capacity to fill the gap, but they're exclusively contracted through our network now." I turned from the window, a plan already forming. "What's our relationship status with Meridian?" "They're grateful for the consistent work we've provided, very open to special arrangements for preferred clients." The pieces were falling into place beautifully. The Henderson Plaza project was Castellano Industries' flagship development this year, the one my father had been using to court investors for an even larger expansion. Delays would be catastrophic, especially with the penalty clauses I knew were written into their contracts. "Schedule a meeting with Meridian for tomorrow. I want to discuss expanding our partnership." "Certainly." "And should I prepare any specific documentation regarding Castellano Industries?" I considered this carefully. Revenge wasn't the goal here. Education was. My family needed to understand that their outdated approach to business relationships had consequences. In their quest to maintain control and tradition, they'd systematically alienated the very innovation and adaptability that could have kept them truly competitive. Not yet. Let's see how the next few weeks unfold naturally. Over the following days, I watched the situation develop with the detached fascination of a chess master observing an opponent's inevitable mistakes. Marco called Morrison and Associates daily, pressuring them about timelines for the Midwest expansion. Morrison, in turn, desperately contacted my subsidiaries, trying to expedite processes that typically took weeks of careful coordination. The Henderson Plaza concrete situation became critical when Castellano Industries realized that every alternative supplier was either booked solid or prohibitively expensive. Their project manager, someone I'd actually trained during my brief official tenure with the company, reached out to industry contacts trying to find solutions. Meanwhile, my network operated with its usual seamless efficiency for clients who understood the value of partnership over dominance. Projects moved smoothly, suppliers delivered on time, and regulatory hurdles were navigated with expertise born from years of building genuine relationships rather than simply wielding family legacy and financial leverage. I found myself thinking often about the conversation that had led to my departure from Castellano Industries. It hadn't been a single dramatic confrontation, but rather a series of meetings where my suggestions for modernization, worker safety improvements, and environmental responsibility had been dismissed as naive idealism. "Sophia, you don't understand how this business really works," my father had said during our final official discussion. "We've built this company on relationships, on tradition, on proven methods. You can't just come in and change everything because you read some business school theories." But I had understood how the business worked, perhaps better than they did. I'd seen the inefficiencies, the waste, the missed opportunities. More importantly, I'd seen how other industries were evolving, how companies that embraced change and innovation were thriving while those clinging to outdated models were slowly losing ground. My father's approach wasn't wrong because it was traditional. It was wrong because it was inflexible. In an industry increasingly dependent on specialized knowledge, environmental compliance, and technological integration, the old model of family, connections, and handshake deals was becoming not just insufficient, but actively limiting. Jennifer appeared in my doorway again, her expression carefully neutral in the way that meant significant news. "Ms. Chen, Morrison and Associates has requested another meeting. Emergency status, and there's been a development with the Henderson Plaza situation." "Go ahead." Castellano Industries project manager called our regulatory compliance division directly. Apparently, they're facing permit issues that could delay the project another month. They were given our contact information by someone at the city planning office. I felt a familiar rush of satisfaction, not from my family's struggles, but from the validation of my approach. Years of building genuine expertise, maintaining ethical relationships with regulatory bodies, and focusing on sustainable practices had created exactly the kind of reputation and capability that projects like Henderson Plaza needed. Did they mention my name specifically? No. They asked for S. Chen, but seemed to think you were male. Classic assumption. That detail was perfect. My professional reputation had been built deliberately without emphasis on family connections or personal details that might complicate business relationships. S. Chen could be anyone, and in this industry, most people assumed successful consultants were men. Schedule the meeting. Conference room B and Jennifer? Make sure we have the complete file on Henderson Plaza's requirements. I want to be thorough. As I prepared for what would essentially be my family's business coming to me for help without knowing it, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. Being cast out had been painful, but it had also been liberating. Instead of fighting to change an existing system from within, I'd been free to build a better system, from scratch. My network wasn't just more efficient than traditional approaches. It was more ethical, more sustainable, and more adaptable. We prioritized worker safety not because regulations demanded it, but because it was the right thing to do. We embraced environmental responsibility not because it was trendy, but because it was necessary for long-term viability. We fostered genuine partnerships instead of hierarchical dominance because collaboration produced better results. The irony was that in trying to protect their traditional way of doing business, my family had pushed away exactly the kind of forward-thinking approach that could have kept them competitive. Now they were discovering that the industry had evolved around them, and the very expertise they'd dismissed as unnecessary had become essential. My phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number, but I recognized the area code as local. S. Chen speaking. Ms. Chen, this is David Morrison from Morrison & Associates. I believe my assistant scheduled a meeting with you for tomorrow, but I was hoping we might speak briefly now. We're facing some urgent coordination challenges with a major client, and I understand your network has capabilities that might be relevant. His voice carried the kind of stress that came from promising deliverables you weren't certain you could provide. I'd heard that tone from many contractors who'd overcommitted based on assumptions about available resources. I'd be happy to discuss how we might assist. What kind of timeline are we looking at? Well, that's part of the problem. Our client has very aggressive expectations, and frankly, we may have underestimated the complexity of coordinating multiple specialized vendors across this scale of operation. Morrison & Associates had been recommended by my father because they were traditional and reliable. What that really meant was that they operated using the same outdated model that Castellano Industries preferred. Lots of handshake agreements and personal relationships, but limited systematic expertise or scalable processes. I see. And this client, are they open to innovative approaches, or do they prefer conventional methods? There was a pause. Honestly, they're pretty set in their ways, very hierarchical, very focused on control and tradition. But at this point, results matter more than methodology. Perfect. Well, Mr. Morrison, I think you'll find that our network specializes in delivering results regardless of client preferences. We'll discuss specifics tomorrow, but I'm confident we can find solutions that work within whatever parameters your client requires. After ending the call, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Tomorrow's meeting would be interesting, but it was really just the beginning. The larger conversation, the one with my family, was still to come. That evening, I stayed late in the office, reviewing files and preparing for the subtle orchestration that lay ahead. The city lights twinkled below as I considered the complexity of what I'd built. It wasn't just a business network, it was proof of concept for a different way of operating. A way that valued competence over connections, innovation over tradition, and results over rhetoric. My family had taught me many valuable lessons, even if they hadn't intended to. They'd taught me that being underestimated could be an advantage. They'd taught me that exclusion could be motivation. And most importantly, they'd taught me that sometimes the best way to change a system isn't to fight it directly, but to build something better alongside it. Tomorrow would begin the process of revelation, but tonight I simply felt grateful. Grateful for the rejection that had forced me to find my own path. Grateful for the challenges that had made me stronger, and grateful for the opportunity to demonstrate that being banned from the family business had been the best thing that ever happened to me. The contracts they were terminating represented just a tiny fraction of my actual influence in their industry. They thought they were cutting me off, but they were about to discover that I'd never really left. I'd simply evolved beyond their ability to recognize or control. The next morning arrived with the crisp clarity that only came from a Chicago autumn, and I found myself energized in a way I hadn't felt in months. The meeting with Morrison & Associates was scheduled for 10, but I'd been in the office since 7, reviewing not just the Henderson Plaza files, but the entire web of connections that had brought us to this moment. Jennifer arrived with coffee and her usual stack of morning briefings. But today her expression carried an excitement that matched my own. The Morrison meeting just got more interesting, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I received 3 additional calls this morning, all Castellano Industries contractors, all facing similar coordination challenges, all desperately seeking solutions. I leaned forward, intrigued. Same timeline pressure? Identical. It seems your father has committed to an accelerated development schedule for the entire Midwest expansion. 6 months ahead of what industry standards would suggest is realistic. Jennifer pulled out her tablet, scrolling through notes. Patterson Electric, Riverside Plumbing, and Greenfield Environmental Consulting, all scrambling to meet impossible deadlines with inadequate resources. The picture was becoming clearer. My father hadn't just chosen to work with traditional firms out of preference. He'd promised investors and stakeholders an aggressive timeline that required the kind of coordinated efficiency that only came from years of systematic relationship building. The very innovation he'd dismissed as unnecessary was now the only thing that could save his ambitious expansion plans. And all three companies are either direct partners in our network or completely dependent on our supply chains. Patterson has used our electrical component sourcing for 2 years. Riverside can't get specialized fixtures anywhere else in the region. And Greenfield. Jennifer smiled. Well, they're essentially a front office for our environmental compliance division. I stood and walked to the window, watching the morning traffic flow through the streets below. Each car represented someone going to work, pursuing goals, building something meaningful. It reminded me why I'd started Strategic Solutions Network in the first place, not for revenge or family drama, but because I genuinely believed there was a better way to operate in this industry. Jennifer, I want you to do something for me. Reach out to all three companies and schedule individual consultations, not as emergency sessions, but as comprehensive partnership evaluations. I want to understand their full scope of challenges, not just the immediate crisis. Of course. Any particular approach? Treat them exactly as we would any potential long-term partners. Full service assessment, innovative solutions, fair pricing. This isn't about leveraging their desperation. It's about demonstrating what real collaboration looks like. The distinction was important to me. When my family had pushed me out, they'd assumed I would either fail quietly or resort to petty competition. They couldn't conceive that I might build something genuinely superior to their approach. Today's meetings would be an opportunity to show not just my capability, but my character. At 9:30, I reviewed my appearance in the executive washroom mirror. Professional but approachable navy suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in D, a style that suggested competence without severity. S. Chen had built a reputation for being brilliant but unpretentious, someone who could solve complex problems without unnecessary drama or ego. Morrison and Associates arrived precisely on time, which immediately told me something about their stress level. In my experience, desperate contractors were either chronically late due to crisis management or obsessively early due to anxiety. David Morrison fell into the latter category. He was a man in his 50s, with the kind of weathered confidence that came from decades in construction. But today, that confidence was clearly strained. His assistant, a sharp-looking woman about my age, carried multiple briefcases and had the efficient energy of someone trying to manage an increasingly complex situation. Ms. Chen, Morrison stood as I entered the conference room, extending his hand with genuine warmth. Thank you for making time on such short notice. I have to admit, your reputation in the industry is impressive, but I wasn't sure if you'd be willing to take on something this challenging. I gestured for them to sit, noting how he'd phrased the situation. Not difficult or complex, but challenging. A subtle indication that he was looking for partnership rather than just service provision. Mr. Morrison, challenging projects are exactly what we do best. But before we discuss solutions, I'd like to understand the full scope of what you're working with. His assistant, who introduced herself as Rebecca Torres, opened the first briefcase and began spreading documents across the table. The primary client is Castellano Industries. They're a multi-generational construction conglomerate with significant projects across the Midwest. Traditional company, very focused on family legacy and established relationships. I kept my expression neutral, though internally, I noted how she'd characterized my family's business. Traditional. Family legacy. The same words Marco had used to dismiss my approach, now being presented as potential obstacles to efficient project management. They've committed to an expansion timeline that's ambitious even by industry standards, Morrison continued. 6. Major developments across 3 states, all with coordinated completion dates tied to a significant investor presentation next spring. Rebecca pulled out a timeline chart that made my pulse quicken. Not because of the aggressiveness, I'd seen similar schedules before, but because I recognized my father's handwriting in the margins. Notes about proving capabilities and demonstrating leadership that revealed this wasn't just about business expansion. This was about legacy, about proving that Castellano Industries could compete with more modern, efficient companies like mine. The challenge, Morrison said, leaning forward, is that Castellano Industries operates with very specific expectations about vendor relationships. They prefer direct communication, traditional procurement methods, and minimal technological integration. But the scope of this project requires exactly the kind of systematic coordination and innovation they typically avoid. I found myself genuinely impressed by Morrison's analysis. He understood the fundamental contradiction at the heart of my family's approach, wanting cutting-edge results while insisting on outdated methods. What specific capabilities are you looking for from our network? Rebecca consulted her notes. Primarily supply chain coordination. The project requires materials from dozens of specialized vendors, all with different lead times, quality standards, and shipping logistics. Castellano Industries' traditional approach is to manage each relationship individually, but the scale here makes that impossible. Additionally, Morrison added, we need environmental compliance consulting, regulatory liaison services, and what I'd call diplomatic coordination between vendors who aren't used to working together. Diplomatics. Coordination. I almost smiled at the phrase. That was exactly what my network specialized in. Not just managing logistics, but building relationships that made complex projects flow smoothly. It was the kind of skill that came from understanding that successful construction wasn't just about moving materials and meeting deadlines, but about creating an ecosystem where everyone involved had reason to perform their best work. We can absolutely provide those capabilities, I said. But I'm curious about the client relationship dynamics. How much flexibility do you have in terms of methodology and vendor selection? Morrison and Rebecca exchanged glances. That's complicated, Morrison said carefully. Castellano Industries has very strong opinions about maintaining control. They want to approve major vendors, oversee key relationships, and ensure that their brand and reputation are properly represented. However, Rebecca added quickly, they've also made it clear that results are the priority. If we can deliver what they've promised to their investors, they're willing to be flexible about the details. This was the opening I'd been waiting. My family wanted control and results, but they were beginning to understand that they might have to choose. The beauty of my network was that it could deliver both, but only if they were willing to trust expertise over ego. Let me propose a structure, I said, pulling out my own presentation materials. Strategic Solutions Network operates on what we call transparent partnership principles. We provide comprehensive capabilities, but we also provide complete visibility into our processes. Your client maintains oversight and approval authority, but they also get the benefit of our systematic approach and established relationships. I opened my laptop and connected it to the conference room's display system. The first slide showed a network diagram that I'd refined over years of presentations, but never before had it felt so personally meaningful. Here's how we would approach the Midwest expansion project. Rather than managing dozens of individual vendor relationships, we create integrated teams organized around capability clusters, environmental and regulatory compliance, materials sourcing and logistics, quality assurance and timeline management. Each cluster operates with internal coordination, but external communication flows through designated liaison points. Morrison studied the diagram intently. This would significantly reduce the management overhead for Castellano Industries. Exactly. They maintain strategic oversight and final approval authority, but they're not bogged down in operational details. More importantly, each vendor in the network has experience working with the others. We've spent years building relationships where the plumber knows how the electrician thinks, where the materials supplier understands the environmental consultant's requirements. Rebecca was taking detailed notes. What about cost structure? Castellano Industries is sophisticated enough to know that convenience comes with premium pricing. I'd anticipated this question, and my answer reflected years of building a business model that prioritized long-term relationships over short-term profits. Our pricing is actually more competitive than managing individual vendor relationships, because we operate on volume efficiencies and reduced coordination overhead. The premium you pay for our network management is typically offset by savings in timeline acceleration and reduced change orders. Change orders? When vendors don't communicate effectively, small problems become big problems. A delayed material delivery impacts the electrical schedule, which impacts the inspection timeline, which impacts the completion date. In traditional management approaches, each impact becomes a separate change order with additional costs and delays. Our network approach identifies and resolves coordination issues before they cascade. Morrison leaned back in his chair, and I could see him mentally calculating not just the financial implications, but the stress reduction. Managing complex projects was as much about avoiding disasters as it was about delivering results. Ms. Chen, this sounds exactly like what we need. But I have to ask, what's your timeline for integration? We're already behind schedule, and Castellano Industries is not known for their patience with delays. This was the moment where I had to be careful. I knew exactly how impatient my father could be, exactly how he responded to timeline pressure, exactly what would make him most comfortable with this arrangement. But I couldn't reveal that knowledge without raising questions about my sources. Integration can begin immediately. We maintain what we call hot standby relationships with our key vendors, meaning they're prepared to scale operations on short notice. For a project of this scope, we could have preliminary coordination meetings scheduled within 48 hours and initial material flows within a week. Rebecca looked up from her notes. That's significantly faster than we expected. Mr. Morrison, Ms. Torres, can I share something with you about how we approach client relationships? I paused, making sure I had their attention. Strategic Solutions Network exists because the construction industry has evolved beyond what traditional relationship models can handle efficiently. But that doesn't mean we dismiss the value of trust, reliability, and personal connection that built this industry. I advanced to the next slide, which showed testimonials and case studies from satisfied clients. We combine the efficiency of systematic coordination with the integrity of old-school business relationships. Your client gets cutting-edge capability, delivered through an approach that respects their values and preferences. Morrison was nodding slowly. Castellano Industries would appreciate that balance. More than that, I continued, we can provide regular reporting and communication that gives them complete visibility into every aspect of the project. No surprises, no black box operations, just transparent excellence. The meeting continued for another hour, covering technical details, communication protocols, and implementation timelines. But the real substance had been established in those first 30 minutes. Morrison and Associates needed exactly what my network provided, and they were beginning to understand that working with us wouldn't just solve their immediate crisis, it would elevate their long-term capabilities. As they prepared to leave, Morrison turned back at the conference room door. Ms. Chen, I have to say, this conversation has been enlightening. We came here looking for vendor coordination, but what you're offering is a complete evolution in how complex projects can be managed. That's exactly what it is, Mr. Morrison. And I think you'll find that your client, despite their traditional preferences, will be impressed by the results. After they left, I sat alone in the conference room for several minutes, Processing. What had just occurred? In less than 2 hours, I'd essentially begun the process of taking over the operational management of my family's most important project. Not through competition or conflict, but through genuine superior capability. Jennifer appeared with lunch and an update on the afternoon schedule. The other 3 companies confirmed their consultations: Patterson Electric at 2, Riverside, Plumbing at 3:30, and Greenfield Environmental at 5. All express meetings, all urgent timeline requirements. Perfect. And Jennifer? Start preparing a comprehensive proposal package for Morrison & Associates. Full network capabilities, detailed timeline projections, and cost analyses. I want them to have everything they need to present a compelling case to their client. Should I include any specific references to Castellano Industries' preferences or requirements? I considered this carefully. Include general language about working with traditional, family-owned businesses. Emphasize our track record with clients who value control and oversight, but nothing that would suggest inside knowledge. The afternoon meetings followed a similar pattern to the morning session, but each revealed a different aspect of the web I'd unknowingly woven around my family's business. Patterson Electric had been struggling with component sourcing not just for the Castellano project, but for 3 other major developments. My network could solve their supply chain issues across all 4 projects simultaneously. Riverside Plumbing had expertise in traditional installation methods, but lacked the environmental compliance knowledge required for modern commercial developments. We could provide that expertise while allowing them to maintain their core competencies and client relationships. Greenfield Environmental was perhaps the most interesting case. They'd been founded by a former EPA inspector who understood regulatory requirements but lacked the industry connections to scale his consulting practice. Over the past 2 years, he'd essentially become an extension of my compliance division, though he maintained independent branding and client relationships. "Ms. Chen," he said during our meeting, "I want you to know that working with your network has transformed my business. Not just the revenue, though that's been significant, but the opportunity to work on projects that actually matter." Environmental. Compliance isn't just about checking boxes, it's about building a more sustainable industry. His comment reminded me why I'd started Strategic Solutions Network in the first place. Yes, I'd been motivated by exclusion from my family's business, but the deeper drive had been a desire to prove that business could be conducted more ethically, more efficiently, and more sustainably than traditional approaches allowed. By 6:00, I'd completed consultations with 4 different companies, all critical to my family's expansion project, all completely dependent on capabilities that flowed through my network. But more than that, I'd had 4 conversations about innovation, collaboration, and excellence that energized me in ways that simple revenge never could. Jennifer knocked and entered as I was reviewing the day's notes. All 4 companies have requested follow-up meetings within the next week. Morrison & Associates wants to schedule a presentation for their client. Apparently, they're confident enough in our capabilities to stake their reputation on the partnership. Any timeline on that presentation? Morrison suggested next. Friday. He said his client prefers end-of-week meetings for major decisions. Friday meetings. My father's preference for decades, based on his theory that people made better decisions when they were looking forward to the weekend rather than stressed about the week ahead. It was one of many small habits that had shaped how Castellano Industries operated, habits I knew intimately but couldn't acknowledge knowing. Schedule it, and Jennifer, I want you to prepare something special for that presentation. Not just our standard capabilities overview, but a comprehensive vision for how the construction industry can evolve to meet modern challenges while honoring traditional values. A vision presentation? Exactly. I want to demonstrate that we're not just solving their immediate problems, we're offering a pathway to long-term competitive advantage. That evening, I stayed late again, but this time I wasn't reviewing files or preparing presentations. Instead, I found myself thinking about the strange journey that had brought me to this moment. 5 years ago, being pushed out of my family's business had felt like the end of something important. Tonight, it felt like the beginning of something extraordinary. The irony was that my family's rejection had forced me to become exactly the kind of leader they claimed to want. Independent, innovative, results-oriented, capable of building something significant from nothing. The difference was that I'd learned to combine those qualities with the collaboration and ethical standards that traditional business models often ignored. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate what Strategic Solutions Network could accomplish. But tonight, I simply felt proud of what we'd built and excited about where we were heading. My family thought they'd cut me off from their success, but they were about to discover that I'd built something even more valuable. A business that succeeded by making others successful. A network that thrived by helping others thrive. The contracts they'd terminated were just the beginning of a much larger conversation. A conversation about what business leadership looked like in the modern world, about how family legacies could evolve without losing their essence, and about how being excluded from something small could motivate you to build something magnificent. The week leading up to the Morrison & Associates presentation moved with the intensity of a carefully orchestrated symphony. Each day brought new developments that revealed just how deeply interconnected the construction industry had become and how central my network was to its functioning. What struck me most wasn't the power I'd accumulated, but the responsibility that came with it. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected call that changed everything. My phone rang at 7:15, displaying a number I recognized but hadn't seen. In months, my younger sister, Elena. Unlike Marco, Elena had always been more thoughtful, more observant. She'd been the only family member to attend my business school graduation, though she'd done so quietly to avoid family controversy. "Sophia?" Her voice carried worry mixed with curiosity. "I hope I'm not calling too early. I wanted to talk to you about something strange that's happening at the company." I felt my pulse quicken, but kept my voice neutral. "What kind of strange?" "Dad's been in meetings constantly for the past week. Emergency sessions with contractors, supplier calls at all hours, stress levels I haven't seen since the 2019 recession. Marco keeps saying everything's under control, but the project managers look terrified." Elena worked in Castellano Industries' design division, a role our father had created for her architecture degree while keeping her insulated from operational pressures. But her position gave her visibility into company dynamics that others might miss. "Have you heard any specifics about what's causing the stress?" "That's the weird part. It's not financial. We have plenty of capital for the expansion. It's not regulatory. All permits are in order. It seems to be about coordination. Like they're discovering that managing 6 simultaneous projects is more complex than they anticipated." I found myself genuinely concerned, not about my family's business challenges, but about Elena's position within the company. She'd always been caught between loyalty to family and recognition that some of their methods were outdated. "Elena, can I ask you something? In your design work, do you ever feel limited by how the company approaches innovation?" There was a long pause. "Every day. I have ideas for sustainable materials, energy-efficient systems, worker-friendly site designs. But suggesting changes feels like questioning Dad's entire legacy. It's easier to just do the work and stay quiet." Her response crystallized something I'd been thinking about all week. My network hadn't just evolved beyond my family's business model. It had created space for exactly the kind of innovation that talented people like Elena needed to thrive. The question was whether I could find a way to extend that opportunity to her without creating family conflict. "Would you be interested in seeing some examples of how other companies are approaching sustainable design integration?" "Absolutely. But Sophia, why are you asking? Are you working in construction again?" The moment had arrived sooner than I'd expected. I could deflect, maintain the careful separation I'd built between my professional identity and my family relationships. Or I could begin the process of bridging those worlds. Elena, I'd like to show you something. Are you free for lunch today? We met at a quiet restaurant near Millennium Park, far enough from Castellano Industries' offices to avoid accidental family encounters. Elena arrived looking every inch the successful architect. Sharp blazer, portfolio bag, the kind of confident competence that our father unfortunately never quite recognized in his daughters. You look good, Sofia. Different somehow. More. Settled? Confident? I smiled. I've found work that I love. It's made a difference. Over lunch, I carefully explained what Strategic Solutions Network was, focusing on our approach to sustainable construction and innovative project management rather than our scale or client base. Elena's eyes lit up as I described collaboration methods that prioritized both efficiency and environmental responsibility. This is exactly what I've been trying to convince Dad to consider, she said, pulling out her tablet to show me design concepts she'd developed. Look at this. Integrated renewable energy systems, waste reduction protocols, worker wellness facilities. But every time I present ideas like this, I get told we're not ready for experimental approaches. Her designs were brilliant. More than that, they represented exactly the kind of forward-thinking integration that gave companies sustainable competitive advantages. Looking at her work, I realized that my family's resistance to innovation wasn't just limiting their business growth, it was stifling genuine talent. Elena, what would you say if I told you there were companies successfully implementing exactly these kinds of innovations? I'd say I want to work for those companies. The conversation that followed was one of the most meaningful I'd had in years. Not because of business implications, but because it reminded me that family relationships didn't have to be defined by past conflicts. Elena and I talked about architecture, about sustainability, about the responsibility that came with building structures that would exist for decades. There's something else, she said as we prepared to leave. This morning, Dad mentioned bringing in some outside consulting firm to help with project coordination. Strategic Solutions. Something. Have you heard of them? My heart stopped for a moment, but I managed to keep my expression neutral. I might have. What's the context? Morrison and Associates recommended them. Apparently, they specialize in exactly the kind of systematic coordination that our expansion requires. Dad seemed skeptical about working with anyone outside his usual network, but the timeline pressure is making him consider options he'd normally reject. The pieces were falling into place more quickly than I'd anticipated. Friday's presentation wouldn't just be a business proposal. It would be the moment when my two worlds finally intersected. Elena, can I ask you a favor? After Friday, after the consulting meetings are finished, would you be willing to continue our conversation about sustainable design approaches? Of course. Sofia, today has been inspiring. It's nice to remember that there are people in this industry who care about building better, not just building more. Thursday afternoon brought the kind of unexpected challenge that tested everything I'd built. Jennifer rushed into my office with an expression I'd never seen before, controlled panic mixed with professional determination. We have a situation, she said, closing the door behind her. Patterson Electric just called. There's been an accident at one of their other job sites. Nothing serious, but it's going to require their entire management team for the next week. They can't provide the personnel for the Castellano projects. My mind immediately went to contingency planning. What about Richardson Electric? They're part of our extended network. Already called. They're at capacity with their own projects. Jennifer consulted her tablet. In fact, I've contacted every electrical contractor in our network. Between existing commitments and the specialized requirements for commercial construction, we're looking at a minimum 2-week delay for qualified alternative personnel. 2 weeks. In a project where my father had committed to aggressive timelines, 2 weeks could cascade into project failure, investment complications, and exactly the kind of crisis that would validate every criticism of modern coordination methods. But then Jennifer's expression shifted to something approaching excitement. However, I may have found a solution. There's an electrical contractor in Milwaukee, Apex Systems, that has the capacity and expertise we need. They're not part of our network, but they've expressed interest in partnership discussions. What's the challenge? They're owned and operated by Maria Santos, a woman who's spent 15 years building her company despite significant industry discrimination. She's developed innovations in energy-efficient installation methods that are ahead of anything in our current network. But she's also particular about the kinds of projects she'll accept. I felt a familiar spark of recognition. Another woman who'd built something excellent despite industry resistance. Someone who'd learned to be selective about partnerships because she'd experienced too many relationships where her expertise wasn't properly valued. Set up a call. Today, if possible. The conversation with Maria Santos was unlike any business discussion I'd had in months. Her voice carried the kind of confidence that came from years of proving competence in environments designed to underestimate her capabilities. Ms. Chen, I appreciate the opportunity, but I need to be direct about my requirements. I don't work with companies that treat contractors as interchangeable vendors. I don't accept projects where my team's safety or professional development is compromised for the sake of arbitrary deadlines. And I don't partner with organizations that view innovation as a threat to established methods. Her criteria were exactly what I hoped to hear. Ms. Santos, those requirements align perfectly with our network's principles. Can you tell me more about your energy-efficient installation innovations? I've developed installation protocols that reduce energy consumption during construction by 30% while improving long-term system efficiency. The methods require additional upfront planning, but they result in superior outcomes and reduced environmental impact. And how do traditional clients typically respond to those protocols? Mixed reactions. Companies that prioritize short-term cost savings often reject the approach. Companies that understand long-term value and sustainability embrace it enthusiastically. I found myself genuinely excited about the possibility of adding Maria's capabilities to our network, not just for the current crisis, but for the long-term evolution of our approach. Ms. Santos, would you be willing to consider a partnership that goes beyond this immediate project? We're working with clients who are beginning to understand that innovation and tradition can be complementary rather than contradictory. I'd be very interested in that conversation. By Thursday evening, we'd not only solved the Patterson electric crisis, but added a new dimension to our network's capabilities. Maria Santos agreed to handle the electrical coordination for all 6 Castellano Industries projects, while beginning discussions about broader partnership opportunities. More importantly, the conversation had reminded me why I'd built Strategic Solutions Network in the first place. Not just to prove that I could succeed despite family rejection, but to create opportunities for other talented professionals who deserved better than the limitations of traditional industry approaches. Friday morning arrived with the crisp energy that always preceded significant events. I'd spent hours preparing for the presentation, but not in the way most people might expect. Instead of rehearsing talking points or perfecting slide transitions, I'd focused on understanding what this moment meant for everyone involved. For Morrison and Associates, it was an opportunity to demonstrate capabilities that went far beyond their traditional scope. For my network partners, it was validation that our collaborative approach could handle the most demanding projects. For my family's business, it was a potential solution to coordination challenges that threatened their expansion goals. And for me, it was the moment when years of careful planning would either culminate in professional vindication or create complications I couldn't yet anticipate. Jennifer arrived early with final presentation materials and a detailed briefing on attendee information Morrison and Associates had provided. The Castellano Industries team will include the CEO, the VP of Operations, the lead project manager, and someone from their design division. Elena would be in the room, the sister who'd shared lunch with me just days ago, who'd expressed frustration with the company's resistance to innovation, who had no idea that the consulting firm she'd heard about was led by her own sister. "Ms. Chen, are you all right? You look thoughtful." I realized I'd been staring out the window for several minutes, processing the complexity of what was about to occur. Just reflecting on how interconnected business relationships can become. Sometimes solutions appear in unexpected places. The presentation was scheduled for 10 o'clock in our largest conference room. I'd chosen that space deliberately. It had panoramic windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, visual reminders of the city's evolution from industrial powerhouse to modern business center. The room itself told a story about adaptation and growth that I hoped would resonate with my audience. At 9:45, Morrison and Associates arrived with their usual professional efficiency, but today their energy carried additional weight. David Morrison's handshake was firm, confident, the grip of someone who believed he was about to deliver exactly what his client needed. "Ms. Chen, I want you to know that we've staked our reputation on this partnership. Castellano Industries doesn't typically work with firms outside their established network, but the scope of this project requires capabilities that simply don't exist through traditional channels. Mr. Morrison, I appreciate your confidence. Today's presentation will demonstrate not just our capabilities, but our understanding of how to deliver innovation in ways that respect traditional business values." At exactly 10 o'clock, the Castellano Industries team arrived. My father entered first, and seeing him in person after months of separation created a complex emotional response I hadn't fully anticipated. He looked older, more tired than I remembered, but still carried the authoritative presence that had defined my childhood understanding of business leadership. Marco followed, scanning the room with the kind of assessment that revealed his concern about relinquishing control to outside contractors. He'd dressed for the meeting like a negotiation, sharp suit and carefully composed expression designed to project authority. The project manager, someone I didn't recognize, appeared competent but stressed, clearly feeling the weight of timeline pressure and resource coordination challenges. And then Elena walked in, and our eyes met across the conference room, her expression moved through surprise, confusion, and something approaching understanding in the span of about 3 seconds. But to her credit, she simply nodded professionally and took her seat without any indication of personal recognition. "Gentlemen, Ms. Castellano," Morrison began, "thank you for making time for this presentation. I'd like to introduce S. Chen, founder and CEO of Strategic Solutions Network. Ms. Chen has developed coordination capabilities that I believe will revolutionize how we approach the Midwest expansion project." I stood, feeling the weight of the moment, and walked to the front of the room. My father's eyes showed polite attention. Marco's expression carried skepticism. Elena's face reflected carefully controlled anticipation. "Thank you, Mr. Morrison." "Gentlemen, Ms. Castellano, I'm honored to have the opportunity to discuss how Strategic Solutions Network can support Castellano Industries' expansion goals." I activated the presentation display, beginning with the slide I'd crafted specifically for this audience. It showed a construction timeline, traditional management approach versus networked coordination, with completion dates, cost comparisons, and quality metrics. Castellano Industries has built an impressive reputation through decades of reliable project delivery and strong client relationships. Our network exists to amplify those strengths while addressing the coordination challenges that emerge when scaling traditional approaches to modern project complexity. My father leaned forward slightly, engaged despite himself. Marco remained visibly skeptical. Elena was taking notes, her architectural training evident in how she analyzed the technical information. The Midwest expansion project represents exactly the kind of opportunity where systematic coordination can deliver exceptional results. 6 simultaneous developments, multiple contractor relationships, aggressive timelines, and investor expectations that require flawless execution. I advanced to the next slide, showing the network diagram I'd refined over years of presentations, but today it felt like revealing the blueprint for a vision that had guided my entire career. Strategic Solutions Network operates on the principle that successful construction requires three elements: technical expertise, relational trust, and systematic coordination. Traditional approaches excel at the first two but often struggle with the third. Our network provides all three in integrated fashion. The presentation continued for 30 minutes, covering technical capabilities, cost structures, timeline projections, and quality assurance protocols. But the real communication was happening in the subtle reactions and body language of my audience. My father's questions revealed genuine interest in the coordination methodologies, though he consistently framed them in terms of maintaining oversight and control. Marco's inquiries focused on cost and timeline guarantees, clearly seeking reassurance that innovation wouldn't mean increased risk. Elena's participation was perhaps most interesting. Her questions demonstrated deep understanding of sustainable construction principles and obvious excitement about implementation possibilities. "Ms. Chen," my father said during the question, "your network appears to offer impressive capabilities. But Castellano Industries has always succeeded through direct relationships and personal accountability. How do we maintain that approach while working with your systematic coordination?" The question was central to everything I'd built Strategic Solutions Network to address. "Mr. Castellano, our network doesn't replace personal relationships. It enhances them. Every vendor in our coordination system maintains direct communication with your project managers. The difference is that we also facilitate communication between vendors, reducing coordination overhead and preventing small problems from becoming major delays. And control, decision-making authority, remains entirely with Castellano Industries. We provide information, coordination, and implementation support. You maintain approval authority for all major decisions and oversight of all critical relationships." Marco leaned forward. "What about proprietary methods? Castellano Industries has developed approaches over decades that we consider competitive advantages. We respect and integrate proprietary methods. Our role isn't to change how you do business, but to enhance your ability to scale your successful approaches to larger, more complex projects." The presentation concluded with a slide showing potential implementation timelines and next steps. But as I looked around the room, I realized that the most important communication had happened in the spaces between formal content, the moments when my family began to understand that innovation and tradition could be complementary rather than contradictory. "Ms. Chen," my father said as the formal presentation ended, "I'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss implementation details. This approach addresses coordination challenges we've been facing, and I'm interested in exploring partnership possibilities." "I'd be honored to continue the conversation, Mr. Castellano." As the meeting concluded and participants began gathering their materials, Elena approached my position at the front of the room. Her expression was carefully professional, but her eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. "Ms. Chen, I'd love to discuss the sustainable design integration aspects of your network. The approaches you've outlined align perfectly with innovations I've been developing." "I'd welcome that conversation, Ms. Castellano. Perhaps we could schedule a separate consultation focused specifically on design coordination opportunities." The words were formally appropriate, but the subtext was rich with possibility. Elena understood that something significant was happening, even if she couldn't yet fully comprehend its implications. As the Castellano Industries team prepared to leave, my father turned back for a final comment. "Ms. Chen, I have to say this presentation has been enlightening. We came here expecting vendor coordination, but what you're offering seems more like a partnership in business evolution." "That's exactly what it is, Mr. Castellano. Sometimes the best solutions emerge when we're willing to think beyond traditional boundaries." After they left, I remained in the conference room for several minutes, processing what had just occurred. In less than an hour, I'd essentially offered to transform my family's business operations, using capabilities they didn't realize I'd built specifically to address their limitations. Morrison approached as I was organizing my presentation materials. "Ms. Chen, that was exceptional. I've never seen Castellano Industries engage so thoughtfully with innovative approaches. They're typically much more resistant to change. Mr. Morrison, I think you'll find that most traditional companies are more open to innovation than they appear, provided it's presented as enhancement rather than replacement. When do you think we'll hear back from them?" I gathered my materials, thinking about family dynamics and decision-making patterns I understood better than Morrison could imagine. "Probably by Monday. Castellano Industries prefers to make major decisions deliberately, but when they commit to something, they move quickly." That afternoon, as I sat in my office reviewing the morning's events, I found myself thinking not about business implications or strategic outcomes, but about the expression on Elena's face when she'd realized who I was. Recognition, surprise, and something that looked like pride. For 5 years, I'd been building something meaningful in the shadows, proving that the daughter they'd dismissed could create value that exceeded their expectations. Today, that hidden success had finally emerged into the light, not through confrontation or conflict, but through genuine capability and professional excellence. The contracts they'd terminated had led directly to this moment, the opportunity to demonstrate that being excluded from their business had motivated me to build something better, something that could enhance their success while honoring the buy. Values that had built their legacy. Monday would bring their response, but tonight I simply felt grateful for the journey that had brought me to this point. The rejection that had once felt like failure now looked like the beginning of something extraordinary. Monday morning arrived with an energy that felt different from any other morning in my professional career. I'd spent the weekend in a state of controlled anticipation, knowing that the next phase of this journey would either validate everything I'd built or create complications I'd have to navigate carefully. But what I hadn't expected was the series of calls that began at 7:30 sharp. The first call came from Elena, her voice bubbling with barely contained excitement. "Sofia, I spent the entire weekend researching Strategic Solutions Network, the sustainability initiatives, the innovation programs, the worker development partnerships. It's everything I've been dreaming about implementing in construction. But what I can't figure out is how you know so much about our family's business." Challenges. I chose my words carefully. "Elena, when you work in construction consulting, you develop insights into industry patterns. Many traditional companies face similar coordination challenges when they try to scale." That makes sense, but Sofia, there's something else. Dad spent yesterday reviewing your presentation materials, and I overheard him telling Marco that S. Chen understood Castellano Industries' culture better than any outside consultant he'd ever met. How is that possible? The moment was approaching faster than I'd anticipated. Sometimes understanding comes from paying attention to details others might miss. There's more. This morning, Dad asked me to prepare a comprehensive analysis of our current project coordination methods. He wants to identify specific areas where your network's approach could enhance our capabilities. He's never asked me to evaluate operational systems before. Elena's excitement was infectious, but it also revealed something significant about my father's thought process. He wasn't just considering Strategic Solutions Network as a vendor. He was treating us as potential partners in business evolution. The distinction mattered more than he probably realized. "Elena, that's an excellent opportunity for you to contribute to the company's strategic development." "It is, but Sofia, I keep thinking about our lunch conversation. The way you talked about sustainable construction, about creating opportunities for innovation. It's exactly the vision I've been hoping someone would bring to our industry." The second call came 20 minutes later, from Morrison and Associates. David Morrison's voice carried relief mixed with professional excitement. "Ms. Chen, I wanted to give you an early update. Castellano Industries called this morning. They want to move forward with a pilot partnership, starting with the Henderson Plaza project. That's excellent news, Mr. Morrison. But there's something unusual about their approach. Instead of requesting a standard vendor agreement, they want to structure this as what they're calling a strategic collaboration. They want quarterly reviews, integrated planning sessions, and what Mr. Castellano specifically described as mutual investment in long-term success. My father was approaching this partnership exactly as I'd hoped he would, not as a procurement transaction, but as an opportunity for genuine business relationship building. It validated years of believing that underneath his traditional methodology was a leader who could recognize and embrace superior approaches. What timeline are they proposing for implementation? 2 weeks for initial integration, with full coordination capabilities active within a month. But Ms. Chen, they also requested something I've never heard them ask for before. They want to send their design division representative to shadow your network's sustainability integration processes. Elena would be working directly with my team, learning approaches that I'd developed specifically to address limitations I'd observed in our family business. The irony was perfect, but more than that, it represented exactly the kind of professional development opportunity she deserved. We'd be honored to provide that learning experience, Mr. Morrison. The third call was the one that changed everything. At 9:15, my phone rang displaying a number I hadn't seen on my caller ID for over 5 years. Castellano Industries. Mainline, but the extension that went directly to my father's office. S. Chen speaking. Ms. Chen, this is Antonio Castellano. I hope you don't mind my calling directly, but I wanted to discuss the partnership proposal personally. Hearing my father's voice in a professional context, speaking to me as a business peer rather than a disappointing daughter, created emotions I hadn't anticipated. Pride mixed with lingering hurt, validation mixed with nervous anticipation. Mr. Castellano, I appreciate you taking the time to call personally. Ms. Chen, I've been in construction for 35 years, and I've seen many consultants promise coordination solutions that turned out to be overly complex or incompatible with practical project management. But your presentation demonstrated understanding of our industry's realities combined with genuine innovation. Thank you. We've spent considerable time studying how traditional construction companies can evolve their approaches while maintaining their core strengths. Exactly. That's what impressed me most about your network's philosophy. You're not trying to replace proven methods, you're enhancing them. He paused, and I could hear him reviewing documents. I particularly appreciated your emphasis on preserving direct relationships while improving systematic coordination. My father was describing exactly the balance I'd spent years developing. The synthesis of traditional business values with modern operational excellence that had become Strategic Solutions Network's defining characteristic. Mr. Castellano, successful construction has always been about relationships and trust. Our network simply provides tools to scale those principles to complex projects. Which brings me to my main point. I'd like to propose expanding our partnership beyond the immediate project coordination needs. Castellano Industries is planning a comprehensive modernization initiative over the next 2 years. We want to integrate new technologies, improve sustainability practices, and develop capabilities that will keep us competitive for the next generation. A comprehensive modernization initiative. My father was essentially asking me to guide the evolution of the business that had once excluded me for advocating exactly these kinds of changes. That sounds like an exciting opportunity, Mr. Castellano. What specific areas are you considering for modernization? All of them. Project management systems, environmental compliance, worker development programs, technology integration, vendor relationship management. We've realized that staying competitive requires embracing innovation while maintaining our commitment to quality and reliability. As he spoke, I realized this conversation represented more than business opportunity. It was validation of every argument I'd made 5 years ago about the need for industry evolution. The difference was that now I was being asked to lead that evolution instead of being dismissed for suggesting it. Mr. Castellano, Strategic Solutions Network would be honored to support Castellano Industries' modernization goals. We've developed expertise in exactly the areas you're describing. Excellent. I'd like to schedule a series of planning meetings over the next month. But Ms. Chen, I want you to know that this isn't just about vendor relationships. We're looking for true partnership, shared investment in innovation, mutual commitment to excellence, collaborative development of new industry standards. True partnership. The phrase represented everything I'd hoped to achieve when I'd first started suggesting changes to the family business. Now, years later, my father was offering exactly that kind of collaboration, though he didn't yet realize he was offering it to his own daughter. I appreciate that approach, Mr. Castellano. The best results always come from genuine partnership rather than transactional relationships. After ending the call, I sat quietly in my office for nearly half an hour, processing the complexity of what had just occurred. In the span of 2 hours, my family's business had not only accepted my network's capabilities, but had essentially asked me to guide their strategic evolution. The daughter they'd pushed away for being too innovative was now being invited to lead the innovation they'd finally realized they needed. Jennifer appeared in my doorway with her usual efficient energy, but today her expression carried something approaching awe. Ms. Chen, I've been monitoring the coordination calls for the Henderson Plaza project. Every contractor in the network is reporting enhanced efficiency, improved communication, and timeline acceleration beyond our initial projections. That's excellent news. But there's something more significant. I've received calls from 3 other major construction companies asking about Strategic Solutions Network's capabilities. Apparently, word is spreading through the industry about our collaboration with Castellano Industries. The ripple effects were beginning. Success with one traditional company was creating opportunities with others who'd been hesitant to embrace systematic coordination approaches. What companies? Hartwell Construction out of Milwaukee, Meridian Development from Detroit, and surprisingly, Romano Brothers from Phoenix. All asking about partnership possibilities for major projects. Romano Brothers. I knew them by reputation. Another multi-generational family business with similar traditional approaches and similar modernization challenges. The construction industry was more interconnected than most people realized, and successful innovations spread quickly through professional networks. Schedule exploratory calls with all 3. And Jennifer? Start preparing materials for a Strategic Solutions Network expansion presentation. I think we're going to need additional capabilities sooner than we anticipated. That afternoon brought another unexpected development. Elena called requesting an immediate meeting, her voice carrying urgency mixed with excitement. Sofia, can you meet me at the Morrison & Associates office? There's been a development in the Henderson Plaza coordination that I want to discuss with you directly. We met in Morrison's conference room, the same space where I'd first proposed solutions to their coordination challenges. But today, Elena's energy was different, more confident, more purposeful, more aligned with her obvious intelligence and capability. Sofia, I've been reviewing the coordination protocols your network implemented for Henderson Plaza, and I'm seeing efficiencies I didn't think were possible in commercial construction. Material delivery optimization that reduces waste by 30%. Worker scheduling that improves both productivity and safety. Environmental compliance integration that actually enhances rather than constrains design possibilities. She pulled out her tablet, showing detailed analyses that revealed her architectural training combined with genuine business insight. But what's most impressive is how these innovations work together. Each efficiency enhancement supports the others, creating systematic improvement rather than isolated optimization. Elena, That integration is exactly what we design for. Individual improvements are valuable, but systematic coordination creates exponential benefits. Which is why I want to propose something. Dad asked me to evaluate our current project coordination methods, but I think there's an opportunity for something more significant. What if Castellano Industries didn't just adopt your network's coordination capabilities, but helped develop next-generation approaches that could become industry standards? Elena was suggesting exactly the kind of visionary partnership that could transform not just our family's business, but the entire construction industry's approach to project management. What did you have in mind? Joint development of integrated sustainability protocols, combined investment in worker development programs, collaborative research into construction technologies that prioritize both efficiency and environmental responsibility. Her enthusiasm was building as she spoke. Sofia, we could create a model that other companies would want to emulate rather than simply adopting approaches that already exist. I found myself genuinely excited by her vision, not just because it aligned with Strategic Solutions Network's capabilities, but because it revealed Elena's potential for industry leadership. She wasn't just suggesting innovation adoption, she was proposing innovation creation. Elena, that kind of collaborative development would require significant commitment from both organizations. Long-term planning, resource allocation, willingness to pioneer unproven approaches. I know, but Sofia, I've spent 5 years watching our industry resist changes that could make construction more sustainable, more efficient, more beneficial for everyone involved. This partnership could demonstrate that traditional companies can lead innovation rather than just responding to it. Her comment crystallized something I'd been thinking about since Friday's presentation. This entire situation had evolved beyond business opportunity or family vindication. It had become a chance to prove that construction industry evolution could honor tradition while embracing progress. Elena, what kind of support would you need from Strategic Solutions Network to develop these collaborative approaches? Technical expertise, systematic coordination capabilities, and most importantly, a partner who understands that innovation should enhance rather than replace proven business principles. We spent the next 2 hours developing preliminary concepts for integrated sustainability protocols, worker development partnerships, and technology adoption strategies. But more than the specific ideas, what struck me was Elena's sophisticated understanding of how business evolution could respect traditional values while achieving superior results. As we prepared to leave, Elena turned serious. Sofia, can I ask you something personal? Today has been one of the most productive professional conversations I've ever had. You understand construction challenges better than most industry veterans. You've developed solutions that address exactly the problems I've been trying to solve, and your approach to innovation feels perfectly aligned with my values. How is that possible? The moment had finally arrived. After years of separation, months of careful planning, and weeks of gradual revelation, I was ready to complete the circle. Elena, there's something I need to tell you, something that will explain why Strategic Solutions Network understands Castellano Industries so well. I pulled out my business card holder and extracted a card I'd been carrying for months, waiting for exactly this moment. Instead of the standard Chen card I used for most business interactions, this was the complete version. Sofia Chen-Castellano, founder and CEO, Strategic Solutions Network. Elena took the card, read it once, looked up at me with widening eyes, then read it again. Sofia Chen-Castellano. You're the Chen that Dad has been talking about all week. I am. The consulting firm that's going to modernize our project coordination? Yes. The network that's already improving our Henderson Plaza efficiency beyond what anyone thought possible? That's us. Elena was quiet for nearly a minute, processing implications that I could see moving across her expression like weather patterns. Surprise gave way to understanding. understanding gave way to something approaching awe. Sofia, you've built exactly what our family business needed, and we never knew it was you. I built what I thought the construction industry needed. The fact that it addresses our family's challenges isn't coincidence. It's because those challenges are common throughout traditional construction companies. But that means... Elena paused, working through the implications. When Dad pushed you out for being too innovative, you went and built a company that became so successful at innovation that he's now asking you to lead our modernization efforts. That's one way to look at it. Elena stood and walked to the conference room window, looking out at the Chicago skyline as I'd done so many times over the past week. Sofia, this is incredible. Not just the business success, though, that's obviously amazing, but the way you've approached this entire situation. You could have used your network's influence to compete directly with Castellano Industries, to prove Dad wrong through market dominance. Instead, you've created an opportunity for genuine collaboration. Elena, revenge never builds anything meaningful, but excellence has the power to transform entire industries. She turned back toward me, her expression reflecting excitement, mixed with something approaching pride. Does Dad know yet? Not yet, but I think the time has come for that conversation. When? I thought about the timeline Morrison and Associates had outlined, about the modernization initiative my father had proposed, about the industry transformation opportunities Elena had suggested. This week, after the Henderson Plaza coordination, protocols are fully integrated and the results speak for themselves. Sofia, can I ask you something else? What do you want from this situation? What's your goal? The question was fundamental, and the answer had evolved significantly over the years. 5 years ago, I wanted to prove that my ideas about industry innovation were valid. 3 years ago, I wanted to demonstrate that the daughter Dad dismissed could build something significant. Today, I want to help create a construction industry that's more sustainable, more efficient, and more beneficial for everyone involved. If that process also reconciles our family relationships, that's a wonderful secondary benefit. Elena smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression I'd seen from her all day. You know what I think? I think Dad is going to be proud, not just of what you've accomplished, but of how you've accomplished it. Building something excellent instead of just proving others wrong. That evening, I stayed late in the office, not because of work pressures, but because I needed time to process the day's developments. In less than 12 hours, the careful separation I'd maintained between my professional identity and family relationships had begun to dissolve. Elena knew the truth. My father was unknowingly planning his company's future around my capabilities, and the industry validation I'd spent years building was about to intersect with the family reconciliation I'd never quite allowed myself to hope for. Jennifer knocked and entered, carrying final reports from the Henderson Plaza coordination implementation. Ms. Chen, the results from today's integration are remarkable. Timeline acceleration of 20%, cost reduction of 15%, worker satisfaction scores at unprecedented levels. Morrison and Associates is calling it the most efficient project launch in their company history. And the Castellano Industries project managers? Impressed beyond expectations. Their lead coordinator specifically requested information about expanding the protocols to all 6 expansion projects immediately. The validation was gratifying, but more than that, it represented proof that the approaches I developed weren't just theoretically sound. They delivered measurable results that exceeded traditional methods across every meaningful metric. Jennifer, I want you to prepare a comprehensive report documenting every aspect of the Henderson Plaza integration. Timeline comparisons, cost analyses, quality metrics, worker feedback, environmental impact assessments. I want complete documentation of how systematic coordination enhances traditional construction management. Certainly, should I include projections for scaling these approaches across larger project portfolios? Yes. And Jennifer, Include a section on long-term industry implications. I think Strategic Solutions Network is about to become part of a much larger conversation about construction industry evolution. As I reviewed the day's events and prepared for the week ahead, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 5 years ago, being excluded from my family's business had felt like rejection of my fundamental worth. Tonight, it felt like preparation for exactly the kind of leadership opportunity I was now positioned to embrace. The girl who'd been told she wasn't cut out for construction had built a network that was revolutionizing how construction projects could be managed. The daughter who'd been pushed away for questioning traditional methods was about to be invited to guide her family's business evolution. The professional who'd been dismissed as too idealistic had created practical solutions that delivered superior results while honoring traditional values. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate what Strategic Solutions Network could accomplish. But tonight, I simply felt grateful for every obstacle that had forced me to become stronger, every rejection that had motivated me to build something better, every moment of doubt that had ultimately led to this extraordinary convergence of professional excellence and personal reconciliation. The contracts my family had terminated had been the beginning, not the end, of my relationship with their business. They'd thought they were cutting me off from their success, but they'd actually been creating the conditions for me to enhance their success in ways they'd never imagined possible. And the best part? This was still just the beginning. The real transformation of their business, of our family relationships, of the construction industry itself, was about to begin. Wednesday morning brought the kind of clarity that only comes after sleepless nights spent wrestling with monumental decisions. I'd spent Tuesday evening crafting and recrafting the conversation I needed to have with my father, weighing different approaches and considering various outcomes. But as dawn broke over Chicago's skyline, I realized that authenticity would serve better than strategy. The time for careful orchestration had passed. The moment for genuine dialogue had arrived. The call came earlier than I expected. At 7:45, my phone displayed the familiar Castellano Industries number, but this time I recognized my father's personal extension, the line he used only for conversations he considered genuinely important. "Good morning, Mr. Castellano." "Ms. Chen, I hope I'm not calling too early. I wanted to discuss the Henderson Plaza results personally. The coordination improvements your network achieved in just 3 days have exceeded our most optimistic projections." His voice carried something I'd rarely heard before, genuine professional excitement mixed with what sounded like respect. Not the grudging acknowledgement he sometimes showed successful competitors, but the kind of appreciation he reserved for innovations that truly impressed him. "I'm glad the initial integration met your expectations." "More than met them. Our project managers are reporting communication efficiency they've never experienced, timeline acceleration that seemed impossible last week, and cost optimizations that our accounting department is still trying to understand." "Ms. Chen, how did you develop these coordination protocols?" The question represented an opening I'd been hoping for. "Mr. Castellano, effective coordination comes from understanding how different aspects of construction projects naturally support each other. When you align individual capabilities with systematic planning, the results often exceed what traditional management approaches can achieve. But that level of integration requires intimate knowledge of how construction companies actually operate, not just theoretical understanding. Your network demonstrates familiarity with industry challenges that typically takes decades to develop. My father was describing exactly the kind of insight that came from growing up in a construction family, from understanding business dynamics through years of observation and experience. He was unknowingly acknowledging expertise I'd developed through proximity to his own leadership. "Experience comes from many sources, Mr. Castellano. Sometimes the most valuable insights emerge from studying successful companies and understanding what makes their approaches effective." Which brings me to my main point. Castellano Industries wants to accelerate our partnership timeline. Instead of gradual integration across 6 projects, we'd like to implement your coordination protocols company-wide within the next month. Company-wide implementation. My father was essentially asking Strategic Solutions Network to become the operational backbone of the family business, to guide every major project through systematic coordination approaches I'd developed specifically to address their traditional limitations. That's an ambitious timeline, Mr. Castellano. Company-wide integration would require comprehensive planning, extensive training, and careful change management to ensure successful adoption. We understand the complexity, but Ms. Chen, the Henderson Plaza results have convinced our entire leadership team that your network's approaches represent the future of efficient construction management. We want to position Castellano Industries at the forefront of that evolution. As he spoke, I realized this conversation represented more than business expansion. It was validation of every argument I'd made 5 years ago about the need for industry modernization. My father was not just accepting the innovations he'd once dismissed, he was embracing them as essential for competitive survival. Mr. Castellano, Strategic Solutions Network would be honored to support comprehensive integration, but I want to ensure that our partnership enhances, rather than disrupts, the relationship-building approaches that have made Castellano Industries successful. Exactly. We want innovation that strengthens our traditional values, not innovation that replaces them. After ending the call, I found myself thinking about Elena's suggestion regarding joint development of next-generation industry standards. The opportunity was even larger than she'd envisioned. We weren't just talking about adopting existing innovations, but about creating collaborative approaches that could transform how family-owned construction companies evolved while maintaining their cultural integrity. Jennifer appeared with morning briefings and an expression that suggested significant developments. Ms. Chen, we've received partnership inquiries from 6 additional construction companies since Monday, all citing the Henderson Plaza results as demonstration of capabilities they want to access. 6 companies in 3 days? The construction industry is more connected than most people realize. Successful innovations spread quickly through professional networks, especially when they deliver measurable results that exceed traditional approaches. Jennifer pulled out her tablet, showing me inquiry details that revealed the breadth of interest Strategic Solutions Network was generating. Romano Brothers wants comprehensive coordination support for their Southwest expansion. Hartwell Construction is requesting environmental compliance consulting for 3 major developments. Meridian Development specifically asked about worker development partnerships. Each inquiry represented exactly the kind of opportunity I'd envisioned when building the network. Traditional companies recognizing that systematic coordination could enhance their existing strengths rather than threatening their established methods. But there's something more significant, Jennifer continued. I received a call from the Associated General Contractors requesting a presentation about Strategic Solutions Network's coordination methodologies. They want to feature our approaches at their annual conference as examples of industry innovation that respects traditional business values. The Associated General Contractors, the most influential trade organization in construction, representing thousands of companies across the country. A presentation at their conference would position Strategic Solutions Network not just as a successful consulting firm, but as a thought leader in industry evolution. What timeline are they proposing? The conference is in 6 weeks. They want a comprehensive presentation covering our coordination protocols, partnership approaches, and long-term vision for construction industry development. 6 weeks. Enough time to complete the Castellano Industries integration, document results across multiple projects, and develop presentation materials that could influence how the entire industry approached modernization challenges. Schedule. Preliminary discussions. But Jennifer, I want to ensure that any industry presentation emphasizes collaboration rather than competition. Our goal is to help traditional companies evolve, not to position ourselves as superior to existing approaches. The distinction was crucial. Strategic solutions. Network's success had come from enhancing, rather than replacing traditional business methods. An industry conference presentation should demonstrate that philosophy, showing how innovation could support, rather than threaten, established companies. Wednesday afternoon brought the conversation I'd been anticipating since Elena's revelation the previous day. She called requesting an immediate meeting, her voice carrying excitement mixed with something approaching urgency. "Sofia, I need to see you right away. There's been a development that changes everything." We met at a coffee shop near Millennium Park, far enough from both our offices to ensure privacy for whatever Elena wanted to discuss. She arrived carrying architectural plans and wearing the kind of focused expression that suggested major professional breakthrough. "Sofia, I spent last night reviewing every aspect of Strategic Solutions Network's coordination protocols, and I've realized something incredible. Your approaches don't just solve current construction challenges, they create foundation for addressing future industry requirements that most companies haven't even considered yet." She spread blueprints across our table, showing design concepts that integrated renewable energy systems, advanced materials, and worker wellness facilities in ways that exceeded current industry standards. "Look at this. Your coordination methodologies make it possible to integrate sustainable technologies that would be prohibitively complex using traditional project management. Environmental compliance that enhances rather than constrains design possibilities. Worker development programs that improve both productivity and job satisfaction." Elena's analysis revealed sophisticated understanding of how systematic coordination created opportunities for innovation that isolated improvements couldn't achieve. She was describing exactly the kind of exponential enhancement that made Strategic Solutions Network unique. But there's something more significant. Dad asked me to prepare comprehensive recommendations for Castellano Industries' modernization initiative. Not just operational improvements, but strategic positioning for the next decade of industry evolution. She pulled out additional documents, showing market analysis, technology trends, and competitive positioning studies. "Sofia, the construction industry is approaching a transformation period. Environmental regulations are becoming more stringent, labor markets are demanding better working conditions, clients are expecting more sustainable outcomes, and technology integration is becoming essential for competitive survival." Elena was describing exactly the market dynamics that had motivated me to build Strategic Solutions Network in the first place. The recognition that traditional construction approaches, however successful historically, needed systematic enhancement to remain viable. "What recommendations are you developing?" "Comprehensive partnership with Strategic Solutions Network for systematic coordination. Joint investment in sustainability research and development. Collaborative worker development programs that position Castellano Industries as an employer of choice in competitive labor markets." She paused, meeting my eyes directly. "And full disclosure to Dad about who you really are." The final recommendation surprised me. "Elena, why do you think disclosure is necessary now?" "Because authenticity creates stronger partnerships than careful strategy. Dad is already impressed by your capabilities and excited about collaboration possibilities. When he discovers that the daughter he pushed away has built exactly what the family business needs, that knowledge will deepen his respect rather than creating complications." Elena's logic was compelling, but it also reflected an understanding of our father's character that I hoped was accurate. The man who valued loyalty and family connection might indeed appreciate the full story of how those values had motivated me to build something that could benefit everyone involved. "There's something else," Elena continued. "This morning, Marco approached me about the Strategic Solutions Network partnership. He's concerned about relinquishing too much operational control to outside consultants, even consultants who deliver superior results." Marco's resistance wasn't surprising. He'd built his identity around being the son who embraced traditional business methods, the family member who could be trusted to maintain established approaches. Discovering that systematic innovation delivered better results than traditional management would challenge his fundamental professional assumptions. What specific concerns did he express? Cost, primarily. He's worried that systematic coordination will be more expensive than direct vendor management. But also, control. He's concerned about losing oversight of key business relationships. Both concerns reflected exactly the kind of operational anxiety that had motivated me to design Strategic Solutions Network's approaches around transparency and client control. Our methodologies enhanced rather than replaced traditional management, providing superior coordination while maintaining direct relationship oversight. Elena, those are legitimate concerns that we can address through careful implementation planning. Cost analysis will demonstrate that systematic coordination typically reduces total project expenses through efficiency gains and problem prevention. Control concerns can be managed through reporting protocols that provide complete visibility into all vendor relationships and coordination activities. I know you can address his concerns operationally. But Sofia, I think Marco's real anxiety is about professional identity. He's spent years positioning himself as the family business expert, the son who understands construction better than anyone else. Discovering that his sister has developed superior approaches challenges that entire self-concept. Elena's insight revealed emotional dynamics that went beyond business considerations. This situation wasn't just about operational innovation. It was about family relationships, professional recognition, and the kind of personal growth that comes from acknowledging that others might have valuable contributions to make. What do you suggest? Include Marco in the partnership development process, not as someone whose resistance needs to be overcome, but as someone whose expertise can enhance the collaboration. Your network's coordination capabilities combined with his operational knowledge and Dad's strategic vision could create something more powerful than any individual approach. Elena was suggesting exactly the kind of collaborative leadership that had always appealed to me. Partnerships where different strengths combined to achieve results that exceeded what anyone could accomplish alone. Thursday morning brought an unexpected call that crystallized the significance of what was developing. David Morrison contacted me with news that would transform not just our current partnership, but the entire trajectory of Strategic Solutions Network's growth. Ms. Chen, I wanted to give you advance notice of something remarkable. The Henderson Plaza results have generated interest beyond anything I've experienced in 20 years of construction management. What kind of interest? 3 major development companies have contacted us requesting information about Strategic Solutions Network's capabilities. But more significantly, the Henderson Plaza property owners want to discuss applying your coordination protocols to their entire real estate portfolio. The Henderson Plaza property owners represented one of the largest commercial development firms in the Midwest, with holdings that included dozens of major properties across multiple states. Portfolio-wide, implementation would position Strategic Solutions Network as a regional industry leader rather than just a successful consulting firm. Additionally, Morrison continued, I've been contacted by representatives from the International Facility Management Association. They want to feature the Henderson Plaza coordination model as a case study in their professional development programs. International recognition. The opportunity to influence how construction coordination was taught and implemented across the global industry. It represented exactly the kind of thought leadership position that could amplify Strategic Solutions Network's impact beyond individual client relationships. Mr. Morrison, these developments are exciting, but I want to ensure that our growth enhances rather than compromises the quality of service we provide to existing partners. Absolutely. But Ms. Chen, I think you should understand the significance of what you've built. Strategic Solutions Network isn't just solving operational challenges. It's demonstrating that innovation and tradition can be complementary rather than contradictory. That's a message the entire construction industry needs to hear. Morrison's observation reminded me of conversations I'd had with Elena about joint development of industry standards. We weren't just building a successful business. We were creating proof of concept for how traditional industries could evolve while honoring their foundational values. Thursday afternoon brought the phone call that would change everything. My father contacted me directly, his voice carrying the kind of formal gravity that indicated significant news. Ms. Chen, I wanted to inform you personally about a decision Castellano Industries made this morning. Our board of directors has approved comprehensive partnership with Strategic Solutions Network for all current and future projects. Comprehensive partnership. Not just vendor relationships or coordination support, but the kind of strategic collaboration that indicated genuine confidence in our capabilities and approaches. Mr. Castellano, Strategic Solutions Network is honored by that confidence. But there's something more, Ms. Chen. We want to propose a joint venture arrangement for developing next-generation construction coordination standards, shared investment, collaborative research, mutual ownership of innovations that could transform how the industry approaches complex project management. A joint venture. My father was essentially proposing that Strategic Solutions Network and Castellano Industries become partners in creating industry-wide change, pooling resources and expertise to develop approaches that other companies would adopt. That's an ambitious vision, Mr. Castellano. Ms. Chen, ambitious visions require exceptional partners. Based on our experience over the past week, we believe Strategic Solutions Network represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking that Castellano Industries needs to remain competitive for the next generation. As he spoke, I realized this conversation represented more than business opportunity. It was recognition of exactly the kind of industry leadership I'd dreamed about when first developing Strategic Solutions Network's coordination methodologies. Mr. Castellano, I'd be very interested in discussing joint venture possibilities, but I think such a significant partnership would benefit from comprehensive planning and detailed understanding of each organization's capabilities and goals. Agreed. I'd like to schedule a series of strategic planning meetings over the next 2 weeks. Comprehensive review of both organizations' strengths, detailed analysis of collaboration opportunities, and development of implementation timelines that ensure successful integration. That sounds like an excellent approach. Ms. Chen, there's one more thing. I'd like these planning meetings to include not just operational coordination, but strategic vision development. We're not just talking about improving current projects. We're talking about defining the future of construction industry excellence. After ending the call, I sat quietly in my office for nearly an hour, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. In less than 2 weeks, the family business that had once excluded me for being too innovative was proposing joint venture partnership to develop industry-wide innovation standards. The daughter who'd been told she wasn't cut out for construction was being invited to help define the future of construction excellence. The professional who'd been dismissed as too idealistic was being asked to lead the kind of visionary planning that could transform an entire industry. Jennifer appeared with end-of-day reports and an expression that suggested she understood the significance of recent developments. Ms. Chen, the joint venture proposal represents extraordinary validation of everything we've built, but it also means Strategic Solutions Network is about to evolve into something much larger than a consulting firm. What are you thinking? Industry leadership, thought leadership, the opportunity to influence how construction coordination is understood and implemented across thousands of companies. Jennifer paused, consulting her notes. But also responsibility. Once we accept joint venture partnership with Castellano Industries, we become accountable for results that extend far beyond individual project success. Jennifer's analysis was accurate. Joint venture partnership would position Strategic Solutions Network as co-creator of industry standards rather than just provider of coordination services. The opportunity was extraordinary, But it also required readiness for influence and responsibility that exceeded our current scope. That evening, I made the decision that would complete the circle. Instead of waiting for perfect timing or optimal circumstances, I called my father's personal number and requested a private meeting for the following morning. Mr. Castellano, before we begin joint venture planning, there's something I need to discuss with you personally. Something that will provide important context for our partnership conversations. Of course, Ms. Chen. What kind of context? Personal context, Mr. Castellano. The kind of information that explains why Strategic Solutions Network understands Castellano Industries so thoroughly. There was a pause, and I could hear him processing the implications of my words. Ms. Chen, are you suggesting there's a personal connection between our organizations? I'm suggesting that tomorrow's conversation will help you understand why this partnership means more to me than typical business relationships. I see. Ms. Chen, should I be concerned about any conflicts of interest or complications that might affect our collaboration? The question was fair, and it deserved honest response. Mr. Castellano, I believe tomorrow's conversation will actually strengthen rather than complicate our partnership possibilities. But you deserve full information before making final decisions about joint venture development. Very well, tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, my office. I'll be there. As I prepared for the conversation that would reveal everything, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 5 years of building something meaningful in the shadows. Months of careful planning and strategic positioning. Weeks of gradual revelation and professional validation. Tomorrow would bring the final piece of the puzzle. The moment when my father would discover that the daughter he'd pushed away for being too innovative had built exactly the innovation framework that his business needed to thrive. The contracts they'd terminated had been the catalyst for everything that followed. The exclusion that had once felt like rejection had become the motivation for building something extraordinary. And now, that extraordinary achievement was about to become the foundation for exactly the kind of family and business relationship I'd always hoped we could develop. Tomorrow would change everything. But tonight, I simply felt grateful for every obstacle that had made me stronger, every challenge that had forced me to excel, and every moment of doubt that had ultimately led to this extraordinary convergence of professional success and personal reconciliation. The girl who wasn't cut out for construction was about to show her family what construction excellence really looked like. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.